Oh hey everyone, it's Emily, and I thought as part of my end of 2020, beginning of 2021 series, I thought it would be fun to answer the Midyear Book Freakout Tag questions, but for the second half of the year. I absolutely love the Midyear Book Freakout Tag, and it's just a fun way to kind of evaluate a half year of reading. And the questions are designed for the first half of the year to answer kind of at the midway point of the year, but I thought it would be fun to go back and answer some of these questions for the books I read from July to December. And some of them aren't going to kind of translate well, I guess, to answer these at the end of the year. And I do enjoy the end of year book tag as well. So I will link below both my mid-year book freakout tag from this year as well as the end of year book tag. But yeah, it's a different set of questions that really reflects well on half a year of reading. So I thought it would be fun to answer the same questions but for what I read from July to December. So anyway, without further ado, let's get started. I have the notes on my phone here. So the first question is the best book you read in that time frame. So between July and December, it's hard to narrow this down. There are a ton I loved. I might say that The Night Circus might be my favorite one that I read between July and December. There was just something about it that really, really captured me. So that one might be my favorite from that time frame. The next one is the best sequel I read from July to December. And I talked about the David Bod trilogy a lot. I technically read the third one in July, and it was amazing. And I've also talked about the Mistborn series a lot, and I read, I think, the second two of that in that time frame. I don't remember exactly which months I read them, but I talked about this series a lot. So I might go with Assassin's Quest, which was the final book in the Farseer trilogy, as an option, or Wondersmith, which was the second book after Nevermore. And I read both of those between July and December. And Wondersmith was amazing. I absolutely adored it. So I think either Wondersmith or potentially Assassin's Quest might count as some of my favorite sequels from that time frame. And the next question is new releases you haven't read but still want to. And there were plenty of releases from the first half of the year that I hadn't quite got to by the midpoint. So I'll look at the second half, or I've looked at the second half of the year releases that I was excited to get to and didn't get to in the second half of the year. And Devil in the Dark Water and Ready Player 2 were both a couple that I was really excited about and haven't yet been able to get to. So those are a couple of new releases from the second half of the year that I haven't gotten to yet. The next question is the most anticipated release for the second half of the year. And this one doesn't exactly translate well. I answered that question back in July of what I was looking forward to for the second half of the year. And I also have done my most anticipated releases for the first half of this year. I'll also link that video below. So that gives you a sense of what I'm anticipating in the next 6 months, if that helps. Biggest disappointment from that time frame is the next question. And I definitely want to say The Lion Game by Ruth Ware. I have loved every other Ruth Ware book and didn't love that one. And I was so disappointed that I didn't love it as much as I wanted to. I almost always have such a fun time, and it was still fun to listen to. I still love the narrator for her audiobooks, and so I had a good time listening to it as an audiobook. But it was definitely not my favorite Ruth Ware, and I didn't love it nearly as much as I loved the others that she's written, so that was definitely a disappointment. The next question is biggest surprise, and there weren't a ton of surprises. I think I had what turned out to be pretty accurate expectations, I think, going into some books. And I don't go into every book expecting that it's going to be a life-changing, amazing, best book I've ever read. You know, I don't think you have to necessarily only read books that you feel like are going to be the most amazing, life-changing things you've ever read. But there were a few surprises, I think, or a couple of surprises. I don't always anticipate that So I do adore YA fantasy. I still read quite a bit of YA fantasy. I get Fairy Loot every month, and I absolutely adore Fairy Loot. And I actually do tend to have a really, really good time with the books that Fairy Loot puts in their boxes. But I don't tend to expect them to be ones that I guess will stick with me for a long time. They might be ones that I occasionally want to reread when I'm feeling in the mood for just like a fun story that just puts a smile on my face and is just a good time. But I don't necessarily expect much more than that. And Incendiary and Fable were both Fairy Loots that I actually just really, really adored this year and really stuck with me, were things that I thought a lot about, really had a fun time reading, and I'm really, really, really excited about the next books in those series. So I guess that kind of counts as a surprise of sorts, but the next question is a favorite new author from that time frame. So from July to December, I think I read my first N.K. Jemisin. So that was a huge standout. I absolutely loved the 5th season. So N.K. Jemisin is a huge standout. I also read my first T.J. Klune book, House in the Cerulean Sea, and that was also one that I just absolutely adored, and so that's another one. I also read my first Matt Haig book, The Midnight Library, and really, really loved it. So those are a few standout authors that I read for the first time. The next book is Newest Fictional Crush, and I said this in the last Midyear Book Freakout Tag as well. I don't go into books for the crushes or for the OTPs or for romance. That tends to be my least favorite part of the fantasy books I read. If there's a romantic element in the fantasies I read, I don't tend to read a ton of romance books, and you know, there definitely are some that I thoroughly enjoy, but I don't know, that doesn't tend to be the thing that sticks out with me. So keep that in mind. But I did really like Addie and Henry from The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I like their dynamic a lot. And I also, Fable and West from Fable by Adrienne Young. I mean, that's not something that's developed a ton in Fable. Fable's a very short book, and it's not developed a ton, but there was still something about their dynamic that I really, really liked. So that maybe can count. But the next question is newest favorite character, and I mentioned the Nevermore series above, and Morgan Crow and Jupiter North from that series. I read both of these. I think I read the first one in July, and maybe the next month or a couple of months after that read Wondersmith. Morgan Crow and Jupiter North. I absolutely adore them. I adore both of them so much. I also really adored Linus from House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune a lot, and I also really, really loved Addie LaRue from The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. So those were some standout characters for me. The next question is a book that made you cry. So I don't think, looking back at the list, I don't think any book actually made me cry in the second half of the year. It's pretty rare for that to happen. But one that did make me really emotional was The Midnight Library. And without going into huge detail, there's huge trigger warnings in that book for suicidal ideation, a suicide attempt. And I fortunately, personally, haven't really experienced that, but I'm close to people who have. And Matt Haig does not hold back as far as what the character is thinking and what she's experiencing. And so it was definitely very emotional to potentially get a glimpse into what people I've been close to who have experienced that might have been going through. And that was incredibly heartbreaking. So that one definitely made me very emotional. I don't think it made me full on cry, but anyway, but that one definitely was probably the most emotional I've been reading. The next question is a book that made you happy, and this is definitely House in the Cerulean Sea is probably my answer here by T.J. Klune. Another honorable mention is the Nevermore series by Jessica Townsend. Both of those are they just put a smile on my face the whole time. I just love them. They're just a hug for your heart. So I can talk a tad about what they're about just to give some context. So the Nevermore series follows a girl who is cursed, and she's supposed to die on her 11th birthday, but instead she's rescued by Jupiter North to go to the magical land of Nevermore and try to be part of the Wondrous Society, and it's just a delightful middle grade. House in the Cerulean Sea follows a man named Linus who works for a government agency that is supposed to look out for magical youth who are in different orphanages, and so they go to different orphanages and make sure that they're running well, that the kids are happy and taken care of. And Linus gets a special assignment to go to a very special orphanage with magical children, and it's his adventure falling in love with these kids and just getting to know them and coming to really appreciate them, and coming to see that he needs to question a lot about what he believed and where his life was headed before. And it's freaking delightful. Anyway, the next question is the most beautiful book you have received from July to December. So I don't have them with me, so that's unfortunate. This is a bad time to answer this question. Okay, future Emily here. I am back from the tiny house, and I remembered that I didn't have these books with me, and I was kind of sad that I couldn't show you how beautiful they are. So I'm just decided to film a separate clip to show you Kingdom of the Wicked, and this is the art on the back of the Fairy Loot version. I'll take the dust jacket off for just a moment. And here's the cover of it. And then it also has something embossed on the front here, and then has these gorgeous stenciled edges that are just stunning, and then it's just sprayed black on the top and bottom. So that's Kingdom of the Wicked. And then I also absolutely adore, so this is the cover of Stardaughter, which is just absolutely stunning. I love it. And it also has these kind of shimmery gold sprayed edges, which I absolutely love. This one doesn't have much going on the rest of the actual book as far as anything embossed, but it does also have this gorgeous artwork on the back here. So yeah, another absolutely stunning book. So anyway, alright, back to the other part of the video. The last question is, what do you need to read by the end of the year? This doesn't necessarily translate well to doing it now, and I definitely already have videos of like the most anticipated ones that I want to read coming up, my most anticipated releases coming up. So I do have some things that can kind of get to an answer that's in this vein. So I'll leave those videos linked below. And I actually watched my response from the one where I did it in the middle of the year to see if I'd actually read those. And of course my response wasn't helpful. I was like, well, I want to read everything by the end of the year. And I was like, all right, good job, Emily. So I ultimately said that I wanted to focus on series and getting the series wrapped up, which I do think I did a really good job of doing. So I mentioned, you know, finishing the Mistborn series and finishing the Farseer trilogy and stuff like that I did actually do by the end of the year. And there are still some series I'm working on that I mentioned there, but anyway, so I think that's the best I can do for that question. But yeah, anyway, let me know what your answers to these questions are for the second half of the year. I had a fun time looking back at these questions and just reflecting on the awesome reading year I had for the second half of the year. Just overall had a great reading year. So thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe for more bookish content. I will link my Twitter and Instagram down below. That's where I like to hang out. I will also leave more information about how you can support the Black Lives Matter movement, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.